He destroyed her heart. So she decided that the whole world would hear her pain. Have you ever felt like you were invisible, even to those who said they loved you? It's not just rejection that hurts. It's the way she makes us look in the mirror and no longer recognize ourselves. She believed she was special. Until he looked into her eyes and said, "You will never be enough." It wasn't a scream, it was a silent sentence, and that's why it hurt more. Because sometimes the pain that marks the most is the one that no one sees. She didn't cry in front of him. Neither screamed nor begged. He just stood there with a lump in his throat and a world collapsing inside his chest. Anyone who has been through this knows, the worst part is not the end of the relationship. It's the echo that remains. The feeling that maybe he is right. That maybe you really are just that. Have you ever felt this? The shame of having believed too much? The tiredness of trying to prove yourself, when all you get back is doubt, contempt, silence? She felt it. Alone in the room, surrounded by photos, memories, broken promises. And the worst of all, the promise she made to herself that love was real. But this story is not just about him. It's about what she did with that pain. Because there is a type of rejection that does not destroy. There's one that wakes up. When he left, she was left in pieces. But within those pieces, there was a voice. Weak at first. But it said, what if he's wrong? That question was the spark. At first, she just wanted to survive. Then, she wanted more. I wanted to sing. Not for him. Not to prove anything. But to listen. To remind herself that she still existed. That pain would not define the end of his story. And that's where it all started. Not on a stage but in a dark room. Not in front of applause but in front of the mirror itself. The first note came out shakily. The second firmer. Until, without realizing it, she was writing what the whole world was going to sing. This is Adele's story. But it could also be yours. Because perhaps you too are in silence right now. Feeling that no one sees you, that no one hears you. But what if the pain you feel today is exactly what will trigger your revolution? If you've ever felt like you weren't enough, comment below, I've heard that. This video is for you. Watch until the end. Every second was made to touch those who already wanted to give up. Leave a like if this story has already started to move you. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next invisible twist that could inspire yours. Before the awards, the lights, and the crowds, Adele was just a young girl with a broken heart. A devastating ending. A betrayal that destroyed not only a relationship, but trust, plans, and the ground on which she stood. As he moved on, she cried, alone, invisible, broken. The bed became captivity. Food became consolation. The songs she loved were now knives. Everything reminded him. Even silence. Mainly silence. He didn't send a message. Didn't call. He didn't apologize. Because for him she no longer mattered. It was as if I had been deleted from history. Cancelled from life itself. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. The confident girl who dreamed of the stage was now just a shadow. Face swollen from crying. The soul drowned in a sea of doubts. Why wasn't I enough? This question became a cruel mantra. She asked herself this in the shower before going to sleep, while pretending to be fine. And the worst thing is that no one saw it. She smiled in the photos. He said, I'm fine, automatically. But inside, it was just shards. Her friends tried to cheer her up. But she felt like no one understood. How can we explain this pain that doesn't bleed on the outside, but destroys on the inside? How to say that what hurt wasn't him leaving? That's what he took with him. Self-esteem. The joy. The sparkle in the eyes. And it wasn't just the end of the relationship. It was the beginning of a spiral. Of sleepless nights. Of dragging days. From a sadness that stuck to the body like dust. She tried to sing. But the voice failed. As if even that had died. She couldn't finish a song. Everything seemed stupid. Weak. Meaningless. She thought, who will want to hear my pain? Who am I to think I have anything to say? The stage that was once a dream became fear. Fear of being judged. Of being ridiculed. Of being forgotten before even being known. And all the while, he glowed. New photos. New girlfriend. As if I had never said, I love you. As if she had never existed. She watched. Quietly. With cell phone in hand and breath held. Sliding your finger across the screen like someone cutting your own soul. Comparison. Humiliation. Shame. She said she didn't care. But I cried in secret. He hated himself for still loving. For still remembering. And deep down, I felt like maybe he was right. Maybe she really was just good enough to be left behind. She asked herself, what if this is my story? Be the one that no one chooses. The one who always feels too much. The one who gives everything and leaves nothing. The one that no one sees. It was into this abyss that she sank, with tears flowing softly so no one could hear, with her soul screaming, in a world that only told her to shut up. As glamour. No audience. Just her and the rubble of a dream. And it was there, in this dark place, that the next part of the story began to take shape. But she still didn't know. I still couldn't see. I still didn't have the strength to get up. She only felt the pain. Spiked. Button. Unfair. And maybe that's why you're here now. Because you know this pain. Because have you ever wondered if your worth depends on who chooses you, or who leaves you? Maybe you are in that same silence, with a scream stuck in my throat, and no one to hear it. But it's still here, and that says it all. If this part of the story spoke to you, comment here, I know what it's like. And stay with me until the end. Because this story still has a lot to come. Leave your like now if you felt this pain inside. Subscribe to the channel because the next beat of her heart could be the beginning of your turning point too. But one day in silence she picked up the notebook. It wasn't planned. It wasn't pretty. There was no soundtrack or opening sky. It was in the middle of another sleepless night, with my face still damp from crying. She got up from the bed without knowing why. He walked to the corner of the room, where an old notebook was thrown among clothes and souvenirs. It was an old notebook. Needed. With coffee marks and torn out pages. No one would give anything for him. But she knew what he carried. There were pieces of what was once a dream. Loose verses, lyrics without endings. Ideas she abandoned when she began to believe she was also abandonable. And that night, she picked up a pen. The hands were still shaking. Breathing was heavy. But something inside her said, write? Not to post. Not to show. Just to breathe. She didn't know what she was doing. I just wrote. And the words didn't come with logic. They came with pain. It was as if the pain was pouring onto the paper straight from the chest. No filter. No beauty. Just true. I gave everything. You left. But I stayed. 3 lines. 3 truths. 3 beats of a tired heart, but still beating. And there, alone, with her eyes burning and her voice silent, she felt something different. Not relief. Not peace. But presence. For the first time in weeks she was with herself. Without trying to please. Without asking to be seen. Without running after anyone. She looked at those words and whispered, I'm still here. It was almost inaudible. But it was real. And it was the beginning. She wrote again the next night. And in the other. And in the other. Without anyone knowing. While the world thought she was missing, she was being born again. He wrote on loose sheets of paper, on napkins, on the back of overdue bills. I wrote without knowing if it was lyrics, an outburst, or a scream. I just wrote. One night, between pages and tears, she drew a broken heart. And, next to it, he wrote a small sentence which would be the password for everything that would come later. My voice will pierce through him. It wasn't about revenge. It was about existing. About turning the hole in your chest into a passage to something bigger. Nobody saw it. Nobody applauded. But there, in that sentence, she made a pact. Not with fame. Not successfully. But truthfully. She decided that if she had pain, then she was going to sing with pain. And if no one wanted to listen, that would be fine. Because she was going to sing anyway. She didn't have a stage. But there was paper. There was no audience. But he had feelings. And that was all he needed. In that invisible decision, she didn't become a celebrity. She became the author of her own story. And maybe you are there too, in the dark, thinking no one is watching. Thinking that there is no more strength, no meaning, no space. But what if your paper is still blank? What if all that's left is for you to decide to write? Comment here, my story isn't over yet. And subscribe to the channel now, because if you feel this change coming, it's because it's already started. The next part will show how that wounded voice began to echo throughout the world. Don't leave here. This journey is yours too. Shortly after, someone like you exploded on the radio. But no one knew what had happened before that chorus. No one imagined that that hoarse, raw voice, cutting through the silence, had come from a dark room, where a girl was wondering if she was still worthy of love. She didn't arrive by breaking doors. He arrived with a piano and a scar. It arrived in the way that only those who have felt too much can reach it, deep. It was as if each note said, I bled but I survived. And the world fell silent to listen. What started with scribbles on paper became a platinum record. What was born from an absence became a global presence. She released 21. An entire album written with the heart still open, still throbbing but alive. And when Rolling in the Deep played for the first time, something changed in the air. It was a woman saying in all words, "You underestimated me, and that will echo forever." The song climbed the charts. It went up quickly. But it wasn't just for the sound. It was for the truth. The way she sang without apologizing for feeling. The way she turned every tear into audible poetry. The critics, who always have something to say, were left breathless. Prizes began to appear. Not one or two. 7 Grammys in one night. 7. And she on stage crying. But now it was another kind of crying. It was a cry of someone who remembers where they came from those who know what it cost, from someone who, inside, still feels the echo of that phrase. You will never be enough. And do you know what the most beautiful part is? Adele never needed to respond in anger. She didn't need to humiliate anyone. There was no need to scream. She just sang, truly, in pain, with soul. And the world listened. From London to Japan. From radios to stadiums. It became the soundtrack to broken hearts around the world. And him? He heard it too. You bet it does. Fall towards. Every chorus. Each melody that said, without saying, "Look what you missed." But that wasn't her focus. She didn't sing to him. I sang to her. For the woman who almost believed she was worthless. For the girl who almost gave up. For so many others who were still in the dark looking for a way out. Adele became a legend. Not because I wanted to be famous, but because she decided to be true. She showed that the stage is not just light. It's also shadow. That the strongest art is born from the deepest silence. And it all started with an invisible decision. With a pen shaking in his hand. With 3 sentences on torn paper. With a voice saying softly, "I'm still here." If this part of the story moved you, subscribe to the channel now. Because it's not just about Adele. It's about you. About everyone who ever thought they no longer had a voice, and discovered it was just the beginning. The next step in this journey will show how this strength grew even more, and why it was never the same after that. Don't leave here. You will see yourself in this turn too. How many times have you felt too small? Small to be noticed, to be chosen, to be taken seriously. How many times has someone you loved looked you in the eye, and made you doubt yourself? It didn't have to be a scream. Sometimes it's the way they ignore you, the way they turn their backs, the way they move on as if you never existed. And then you start to believe that maybe the problem is you. That maybe you ask too much, dream too much, feel too much. Have you ever felt this? The feeling of carrying a world of possibilities inside, and no one seeing it? Have you ever looked in the mirror and asked yourself if you are wasting time? Should you give up, put your head down, follow the script that others expect of you? Maybe you are right there right now. In the midst of doubt. In the middle of the silence. Thinking no one cares. But pay attention to one thing. The Adele who won the Grammy is the same Adele who cried in her room thinking she wasn't enough. The difference between the two wasn't magical. It was a choice. An internal, quiet, intimate decision. Done away from the cameras, without witnesses, without an audience. That's when she decided that she wasn't going to wait to be approved by anyone. That even though it hurt, even though she was injured, she was going to use her voice. And that's why this story matters. Not because she became famous, but because behind success there is something you also have. Pain, desire, and the chance to choose. So I really want to ask you, what are you carrying in there that no one sees? What story are you afraid to tell? What dream do you hide because they said it was too much for you? Are you waiting for the world to validate your voice? Or are you willing to use it even in silence? Because perhaps its biggest turning point hasn't happened yet. But she can start today. Not with applause. Not with results. But with an invisible choice. You can decide now that you will no longer be limited to what they said about you. You can choose that your pain will become a starting point, not an end. You can choose to be the author of your story, even if the first sentence still hurts. Maybe you are in your dark room right now, alone, tired, lost. But if there's one thing that Adele's story proves, it's that this could also be the place where it all begins. And there, what will your invisible decision be? If any part of this story touched you, write in the comments, "I'm writing mine now." Because when you write, you activate. When you share, you begin to break out of the silence. You don't need to scream, but you need to decide. And when you decide, the world will listen. Even if it takes time. Even if it seems impossible now. Because the difference between disappearing and being unforgettable, and that, a decision, done in silence, but it transforms everything. Comment here. What was the silence that taught you to listen to your own voice? Right, even if it hurts. Sometimes this is how the turnaround begins. If this story activated something inside, share it with someone who needs to remember that it is still possible. Leave your like now, not as an automatic gesture but as an intimate confirmation that you too feel that the time has come to rewrite your story. Subscribe to the channel, because here each episode is a spark for those who carry a dormant fire. And in the next episode, the journey of a broke woman, a single mother, rejected by 12 publishers, who decided that her magical story didn't need permission to exist. She believed when no one else did. And he changed the world with a pen in his hand. See you there. Because perhaps it's your time to write too.